Shabbat Shalom, and I want to wish everyone a Chag Pesach Sameach in advance. Today I wanted to talk about a critical moment that occurs early on in the Pesach Haggadah. It's a critical moment in the whole process of liberation, and something that I think we can all relate to in our own individual process of exiting from our self-created Mitzrayim, our self-created state of slavery, and as we step closer in the direction of our own personal promised land. That's the moment when we realize that whatever situation we're in that we find oppressive or depressing or limiting in some very difficult way, in the way that our ancestors were limited by the slavery in Egypt, there comes a moment when it's no longer acceptable to us. And at that moment, and only at that moment, are we in a position to liberate ourselves from whatever Mitzrayim we might find ourselves in. And so it was with our ancestors. The story is that we spent 210 years in Egyptian slavery. Now, 210 years is an awfully long time, at least 5 generations, which means that by the time of the last generation of the enslavement, there was no one alive, at least biologically, the way we calculate time. There was no one alive that could remember a time when there wasn't a state of slavery. It seemed like it had always been, and it seemed like it always would be. Just another brief comparison. We're celebrating, I think, in this coming year, the 150th anniversary of the founding of Canada. So Canada, 150 years seems pretty substantial, but that's much less time than the time we spent enslaved in Egypt. So just gives you an idea of how long a time that really was. And so to awaken from that state of inevitable acceptance is a huge step. But there comes a time when the Israelites, it says in the Haggadah, and I want you to catch this if you can, it says that they cried out from under the burden of their oppression, and that cry reached God. And when that cry reached God, it says, God remembered his covenant. And at that moment, the mechanism of liberation suddenly swings into play. Now, is it possible that God actually forgot the covenant? Is it possible for God, as we understand God, to forget anything? I think what it means is not that God forgot and then remembered, but we could say that God within us forgot and then remembered. It's as if we find something acceptable, as unacceptable as it might be in reality, but if we accept it, then God, as it were, folds his arms and says, good enough for you, good enough for me. It's only when we realize that where we are is no longer good enough, that God will unfold his arms and say, not good enough for you, then not good enough for me. And that is when we start to be able to take action, and when we can start to throw off the burdens of Egypt on whatever level they may exist. You know that there are 4 cups of liberation in the course of the Pesach Seder. The way I understand them is that there's one cup that symbolizes freedom from physical oppression. There's the second cup that symbolizes freedom from emotional oppression. There's a third cup that symbolizes freedom from mental oppression. And the 4th cup of liberation is liberation from spiritual oppression. These are all the different kinds of Egypt that we want to release ourselves from in the process of our leaving Egypt and getting closer to our own personal promised land. So I want to wish you a Chag Pesach Sameach and also a Shabbat Shalom and a joyful Seder celebration this coming Friday and Saturday. Chag Pesach Sameach.